A Place Called Home by Laurie Wick. Chapter 10. 2 days later, Mark walked beside a silent Christine toward his grandmother's house. He carried a small case belonging to Suzanne that held the dresses and such that Julia had sent over for Christine. Mark looked down at Christine's face and saw a mixture of determination and fear. He was on the verge of reassuring her when she spoke. "Did you talk to the sheriff about my being stabbed?" "Yes, and I also told him briefly of your situation." Christine looked troubled at this, so Mark spoke again. "He had to know, Christine. If there should be any stranger asking around, the sheriff would need to know why." "But no one knows I'm in Baxter." "That's true, but the fact still remains that someone did stab you, and although the sheriff agreed with me that it was probably not related to your home situation, there's no reason we should take chances." The feelings of safety which Christine had harbored at being so far from Spooner and Vince Jeffers now evaporated. But Mark and Christine were already walking up the wide steps to the large porch and front door of Grandma M's house. The fact that this house was going to be Christine's new home for an indefinite period of time banished all other thoughts from her mind. Christine followed Mark into a lovely parlor and sat as he directed. Mark disappeared, but returned shortly, preceded by a woman of medium height, whose steps belied her 70 years. Her hair was a silvery white and in close curls around her head. Her face was liberally seamed, and the expression in her light blue eyes was hesitant. It occurred to Christine at this moment, the woman was not very happy about the idea of her working here. This thought put Christine on the defensive, and her eyes went to Mark's face. After Grandma M had seated herself across from Christine, Mark made introductions. "Gram, this is Christine Bennett. Christine, this is Emily Cameron." Grandma M, to her friends, old and new alike. The women exchanged hesitant smiles and nods. Each measured the other with different thoughts flying through her head. Emily knew she was fighting God's will as she sat there, hating herself for getting old and hoping to find something about this girl she didn't like, to ease her conscience when she told Mark that it would not work out. She feared this girl would come in and take over. Life as she had always known it would be changed forever, and she had always struggled with change. Christine, with her own thoughts, wondered if this woman was kind or unreasonably set in her ways that did not include another woman in the house. Needing this job desperately, if she were going to get her life back in control, Christine decided to be sweet and congenial. Grandma M broke the silence. "How old are you, Christine?" 19, ma'am." "And you're familiar with work around the home and yard?" "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Hall, my grandfather's housekeeper, taught me everything she knew about running a home." "Well, you understand, of course, that I will be running this house, and you would be helping me." Emily's voice was sharper than she had intended. Christine only nodded, afraid to say more lest it be the wrong thing. "Have you ever stolen anything?" Emily asked abruptly. All ideas of sweetness and congeniality flew out the window. Christine stood up so quickly that the chair nearly tipped over. Her eyes flashing with anger and pain, she turned accusingly to Mark. "I don't have to sit here and take this. How dare she ask me such a thing?" Too upset to say more, she turned and nearly ran out of the room. Mark caught her at the front door. Emily sat frozen in the front room, her hand pressed tightly to her mouth, listening to the furious whispers at the front door. She prayed fervently that Mark would bring Christine back so she could ask her forgiveness. Why had she said such a thing? A woman her age should be beyond such foolishness. Mark escorted a sober-faced Christine back to her chair, eyes wide and suspiciously wet. Mark sat near his grandmother, knowing she would do the right thing. "Christine?" Emily hesitated, but Christine caught the different tone in her voice, gentle, subdued. "Christine, please forgive me. I don't know why I said such a thing." Again she hesitated. "Well, the truth is I do know. I didn't want it to work between us. You see, I'm old and set in my ways and very afraid of change. Mark tells me you're alone, and I think maybe we need each other." Emily's voice became quieter as she spoke, showing Christine that in this area she was as vulnerable as she was. Emily's voice was just above a whisper when she asked, "Will you stay, Christine?" This woman's honesty went straight to Christine's heart. She felt a sting behind her eyes and a tightness in her throat, enabling her only to nod and smile. Mark's laugh of relief brought all three to their feet. He hugged Grandma Em and then surprised Christine by hugging her also. She had also felt surprised that morning when, after thanking Suzanne and Maggie for everything, they had grabbed her and hugged her too. Spontaneous displays of affection were foreign to Christine, but she was beginning to like it. Mark took his leave after Grandma Em served coffee. The two women spent the remainder of the day working in the garden, sharing companionable conversation, listening and learning, with no doubt in either heart that they had found something special. Christine snuggled down in the covers of the big oak bed. Her bed. The thought felt wonderful. She realized as she lay there that she and Grandma Em had spent so much time outdoors that the only rooms she had really seen were the parlor and kitchen and her own room. Her own bedroom. A feeling of contentment washed over her. Drifting off to sleep with her mind becoming foggy, she would have been hard-pressed to tell you if she had a single care in the world. "Are you sure no one saw you?" "No, Mr. Jeffers, no one saw me." "You went alone?" "Yes, sir." "Where did you say you found this?" Vince Jeffers held out a small piece of paper. "In the closet, in the pocket of a skirt." "You read it?" "No, sir, I never learned." The small man stared at the carpet as he mumbled this. He looked up as he heard paper rustling and found Vince Jeffers reading the note. He watched as the man's jaw clenched and then threw the paper to the desk. "The note is from Carl Maxwell." The small man's eyes widened at this information. "He told her to go to a friend of his in Fall Creek, Mr. Franklin, it says." Vince Jeffers' voice became very calm as he continued. "Let's call around and visit Carl Maxwell, shall we? We'll ask him about this Mr. Franklin in Fall Creek. It's nearly midnight, but I'm sure we can convince him to talk with us." The small man followed as Vince led the way out of the room. Once outside, Vince spoke again, softly and more to himself than to the man behind him. Fall Creek. I wonder why he sent her to Fall Creek. Well, it doesn't matter. Even if she's not there, wherever she is, I'll find her, and when I do... He paused, a cold smile playing over his thin lips. "When I do, everything will be mine."